fantastic to be here, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to, I guess, take this deep dive into the often uncomfortable, these risky and tricky areas for educators when it comes to students' online lives. Unsurprisingly, we've had unprecedented interest in this webinar, which I think really speaks to the current climate and the needs of school leaders like yourselves when it comes to these themes. These can be uncomfortable conversations, but I think, the time has come that we can all agree that, we need to be brave. We need to be brave enough to start those conversations that really matter with our students. So today is really about unpacking what their attitudes and their behaviours towards sex and relationships are, how and what they're accessing online, and essentially how this long-term shapes their relationships. So I'm going to get straight into it. I'm really excited to hear from the perspectives of school leaders and, of course, Maree. So I think we're going to start with the hot topic that I guess has been on everybody's lips this year, and that is pornography. Now, in the past, pornographic content was largely confined to magazines, on book stands, in petrol stations and things like that. But nowadays, it's really readily accessible to everybody. Maree, if a young person looks to access pornography online, what are some of the things that they're going to be exposed to in 2021?
So thanks, Yasmin. The kind of porn that young people are likely to see if they search for a word like sex or porn or, actually any number of other words that might seem unrelated to porn is really not the centrefold it used to be. It's moving high definition imagery of people being sexual, but it's not just people having sex. I think it's really important for people to understand that what they're likely to see includes high levels of aggression, and that aggression is almost always directed towards women. Something like 97% of that aggression is directed towards women. So things like gagging, choking, spanking, incest themes are very common in mainstream pornography, stepdaughter, stepmom, that kind of thing, degradation and humiliation. So lots of messages about gender, power, aggression, disrespect, but also consent and pleasure, so that, in porn they generally don't negotiate consent or have much communication at all about what they might like or not like. It's just very kind of rough, aggressive, full-on imagery, really.
That's it's really difficult to hear those things, isn't it? Because we know in the end there is a long-term impact and a real-world impact. What are you sort of seeing in terms of those results when we're looking at that graphic and violent sexual content they're exposed to?
Yeah, so I think there are a whole range of impacts on young people, ranging from, more likely to engage in risky sexual behaviours, for example, but also, really importantly, I think young people's understandings and expectations of what sex looks like and how women and men, or men and men, or women and women kind of ought to relate to each other in sexual context. So shaping of sexual taste to see the sorts of things that are common in mainstream pornography. So things like choking and gagging actually being quite commonplace in young people's sexual experiences, and things that are often not what girls and women particularly like and enjoy are normalised in pornography. And that's kind of part of the appeal of porn, I think, is that women are shown to be enjoying or behaving as though they're enjoying kind of whatever's done to them. So when we interview young men, they talk about aspiring to or initiating things they've seen in pornography. And when we interview young women, they talk often about their partners initiating what they've seen in porn and really struggling with, wanting to be accommodating and generous in their sexuality, but generally not wanting to do what porn promotes. And I've got a little video of some young people talking about that, which I'll share with you.
Awesome.
I think when boys start having sex, they imagine porn and everything that goes on in porn, because that's the dream, really. Boys, have their way with girls whenever they want. Girls can put their legs behind their head and, take it all.
When a guy watches porn, that's like, I want to try that. You do this, this and this, you know what I mean? And they'll just keep pressuring. Like, I've got mates who do it.
Girls, like they love it in the porn, so maybe boys think that girls like that.
I'll tell her, yeah. She's like, she didn't want to at first, but I just kept hounding her. Finally, she let me go from behind and all this sort of stuff. I'm like,
they don't want to ask because, like, how do you ask? You just say, just do it and hope that she takes it. And I'm sure some girls would take it and just do it because it's, you know, it's awkward sometimes saying no.
So I think, you know, some of what young people have described is kind of this normalisation of coercion, where there's an expectation that boys will pressure or coerce girls to do things they've seen in porn. And it's useful to know, you know, how pervasive young people's exposure and access is. So a study of Australian 15 to 20-year-olds that was released late last year by Our Watch, the National Foundation for the Prevention of Violence Against Women and their Children, found that almost half of boys have seen pornography by the age of 13 and almost half of girls have seen it by the age of 15. A bit over half of young women and a bit under half of young men weren't looking for porn the first time they saw it, so it occurred accidentally or because someone else showed it to them, but it can be really difficult for them to avoid. And young men in particular are often using pornography really regularly. So over half of young men reported using it weekly or more often, and 17% said they used it daily or more often. For young women, those figures were 15% used it weekly and 1% use it daily. So porn's become a kind of default sex educator, if you like, shaping, you know, neural pathways around what is considered to be pleasurable, what the expectations are around sexuality, making it very difficult for young people to navigate safe, respectful, consenting, mutual sexuality.
It's incredibly difficult for them to get that sort of context about what, I guess, sex and intimacy is all about. I read a really great quote recently, and the quote goes, learning about sex from porn is like trying to learn about mountains by sniffing one of those air fresheners from a petrol station. It's manufactured and it's fake. And the problem lies in that you are actually, when you do get to the mountains, you want the familiar. You don't want the real thing. You want the familiar. And for so many kids that are watching this amount of pornography, that familiar for them is that fake manufactured product. So the lines are really, really blurred for them. And I think I might throw to Laura or to Jen, you know, the lines being blurred between porn and real life. You guys are on the ground in schools. What are you seeing when it comes to these sorts of things from the perspective of young people? I know, you know, OnlyFans is something that is popping up, you know, around a lot of different schools. And, you know, a lot of young people are thinking that this is a really good idea to get into. How are you seeing this roll out in schools, I guess, across Australia or in your own?